A flight across Umbrian skies, over medieval towns and ancient fortresses, in the footsteps of St. Francis, with his great love of nature, tasting the wines and local dishes of a farming tradition, in a region where the crafts are a timeless art. Umbria, with the ever-changing colours of its valleys, hills and forests, is thought of as the green heart of Italy. In the northeast of the region, Gubbio lies surrounded by grey, chalky heights. From every side, the city shows off its typical medieval appearance, with the sounds of centuries-old traditions. On the 15th of May, Gubbio celebrates its patron saint, Ubaldo. Thousands of locals and tourists flock to the town to join the famous Ceri festival. The crowd fills the streets and piazzas from early dawn, waiting for the start of the race, and they are really the most important people in this unique event, cheering on the Ceraioli, the bearers of the statues mounted on immense wooden pillars, with boundless enthusiasm. 3 groups, 3 Ceri, and 1 important mission to fulfill: to carry the 3 statues of St. Ubaldo, St. George and St. Anthony to the summit of the Cathedral Mount. The task of the Ceraioli isn't easy. Each mounted statue weighs around 300 kilos, and carrying them demands special technical and athletic training, and above all, great motivation. The 3 statues hurtle through the city streets in a frenzied race. The bearers change over at various points on the route without ever stopping. The groups aren't really rivals. The order that Ceri arrive in never changes and is always respected. But it's not easy to carry them without making a mistake. The aim is to reach the cathedral, but the first statue, the patron saint, should travel more quickly than the others. The task of the Ceraioli carrying the statue of St. Ubaldo is to close the door of the cathedral before the other statues arrive. Even when the festival is over, the Ceraioli are still candlebearers. It becomes part of their identity, a source of passion and pride. Gubbio's traditions are also expressed by the products of her craft workers. The city is home to some of the last remaining crossbow makers. Centuries ago, it was a vital job when battles were fought with forged iron and bristling clouds of deadly bolts. Crossbows were made and used from early medieval times in about 1000 until the invention of gunpowder in about 1450. On the last Sunday in May, Gubbio revives the ancient rivalry between its districts with a crossbow match. Every year for over 5 centuries, the city gets ready to recreate the medieval atmosphere with costumes, standard bearers, processions, and drums.
Suonate così velocemente, andiamo tutti quanti fuori tempo. Alto, giro a sinistra.
But Gubbio's history has even deeper roots, dating back to Roman times. Past and present renew their links during the summer, when the theatre stages classical dramas. The Umbrian countryside stretches in every direction. Umbria is the only region in southern central Italy with no coastline. Its geographical location means the area has been less influenced by Mediterranean trade and has remained closely bound to its farming traditions. Country life can be experienced once again at Città di Castello. The Centre for Folk Traditions describes how families would gather in the evening to get warm around the fire. A little bread and a glass of good wine were enough to round off the day. Satisfied but tired, they knew the next day would unfold in exactly the same way. The tools of the countryside evoke the labor of tireless hands, the smell of the damp soil, the scent of trees in blossom, and the crackling of the embers. Città di Castello nestles in the Val Tiberina. Artists like Raphael, Vasari, and the Vitellis transformed it into a miniature capital of art. The medieval town evolved into a Renaissance city, inspired by ideals of beauty. This artistic tradition lives on in the Renaissance setting of the Palazzo Albizini. Since the 1970s, it has been the home of the Alberto Burri collection, one of the major personalities in contemporary art. The artist gave his native city more than 120 works, from paintings to sculptures. They reflect his interest in the expressive qualities of his materials, describing life without imitating it. Along the course of the Tiber lie the woods of the Val Tiberina. The ruins of medieval fortresses and ancient villages still perch on the hillsides, like Umbertide, with its imposing square tower and circular turrets built between the 14th and 15th centuries. Nowadays, the castle hosts a contemporary art collection. Art is a constant presence in Umbertide. The church of Santa Croce was built right beside the 13th century church of San Francesco. The soloists of Perugia form an internationally acclaimed string orchestra. In the church of Santa Croce, art is expressed through music and painting. The sweetness of the musician's strings blend with the works of Luca Signorelli, which have adorned the interior for 500 years. But Umbria's most skillful painter might seem to be nature herself. In the Lake Transimeno Regional Park, all shades of green are distilled by the waters and plants of the islands. The fishing boats cast a timeless reflection on the still surface of the lake. For centuries, Trasimeno's economy has been driven by fishing. This tradition has shaped the local culture, especially its cooking.
Vabbè. Dove sei stato? Vai,
Trasimeno is Italy's fourth largest lake, the largest not counting the Alpine lakes. In the 13th century, its fishermen had already formed a corporation, the Fish Workers Guild, divided into territorial districts. In recent years, the lake has become less fruitful, and now the boats are motor-powered. But there's still a close link between Trasimeno and its people. These links are renewed every year by the Passignano sul Trasimeno Fish Festival. The star of the show is a pan more than 4 meters across, perhaps the biggest in the world. The 1,000 shades of the lake's surface inspire artists from Perugino, fascinated by the scenery surrounding the lake and its sunsets. South of Trasimeno, almost in Tuscany, lies Città della Pieve, founded in medieval times. The remains of Etruscan settlements can be found at the foot of the hill. Around every corner appear the dark red bricks of churches and houses. The artist Il Perugino was born here, and many of his early 16th century works have remained, like the Baptism of Christ, preserved in a cathedral chapel. The fresco depicting the Adoration of the Magi, which adorns the oratory of Santa Maria dei Bianchi, is another masterpiece. Perugino is also thought to have painted a work in the church of San Pietro. Time has erased part of the painting, which depicts Sant'Antonio Abate between two saints, Marcello and Paul the Hermit. Città di Castello is girdled by imposing 14th century walls. In its center is an alleyway only 60 centimeters wide, probably the narrowest in Italy. In recent years, Umbria's heritage has attracted a growing number of visitors, encouraging improvements in transport links. The Sant'Egidio Airport is Umbria's airport, and it's beginning to fulfill its future role as a focus for intense development for all kinds of tourism in the region. The airport provides easy access to the heart of the region, and visitors can land just 8 kilometers from its capital. One more reason to experience the beauty of Umbria. For centuries, Perugia has been the custodian of a great artistic heritage. But the regional capital is also the backdrop for contemporary events, and since the 1970s it has been a jazz hotspot. Another world lies under the city. In fact, a fortress was built in the 1500s, and for centuries it concealed the streets and houses of old Perugia. When Italy was unified, the Rocca Paolina was almost completely demolished, and today the underground city has returned to the daylight. Events unfold almost without stop in Perugia's main square. Even when there are no exhibitions, the inhabitants' voices create a festive atmosphere among the city's people and its monuments. The Fontana Maggiore by the cathedral is the symbol of Perugia, a masterpiece of 13th century sculpture. But Perugia's origins date much further back. The Etruscan arch has survived for thousands of years, with the remains of the walls along the streets and alleyways of the old city. Ancient remains survive in a modern cosmopolitan city with an open attitude to culture, thanks to the friendly nature of its inhabitants and the university for foreigners. Since its foundation, the university has influenced the city's daily life, enlivening every day of the year.
Perugia is a lively university city because it has hosted a mixture of Italian and foreign students for almost a century.
A very simple story today. An atmosphere. A house in the country. A big room. The biggest room of the house. The kitchen. It's winter. Outside it's cold. And what is falling? The snow is falling. Two people are in this big kitchen. A grandfather and his grandson. The grandfather's reading the paper and his grandson's reading some comics. In the silence, the little boy raises his head, looks at his grandfather and says, "Granddad, what story are you going to tell me today?"
Nonno, che cosa mi racconti oggi?
Perugia's passion for music is a recent phenomenon. Every evening, restaurants, clubs and bars are filled with contemporary sounds, riding the wave of success created by a world-famous festival, Umbria Jazz. The event has grown year by year, eventually becoming one of the most important international festivals of its kind. Frontiers and conflicts between countries, cultures and religions seem to disappear at Assisi. The city is now a universal symbol of hope and unity between peoples. The city's churches often host intercultural events. Here, a concert can unite Japanese and Gregorian song. The common thread is a passion for music, but also a past scarred by earthquake. In this context, the songs become a way of building peace and remembering together the victims of these disasters.
La Basilica di San Francesco nel corso dei secoli, dato che si tratta
As it lies on a seismic zone, over the centuries, the Basilica of San Francesco has experienced 27 earthquakes.
la Basilica aveva bisogno
The latest earthquake wasn't really stronger than the previous ones, but the Basilica was already in dire need of restoration. There were many problems and a commission was set up. It did excellent work. It had united aims and a workforce of over 300 men, and we've had some very, very important results. We're working now to recover fragments of the Starry Sky and Cimabue's rib vault. The church was founded in the 13th century, in the place where the saint chose to be buried. UNESCO has declared it a World Heritage Site. The church bell towers rise from the rooftops, cascading down the hillside. The Rocca Maggiore and its square tower dominates the entire scene. The fortified walls provide wonderful views of the Umbria Valley and its verdant heights. Francis would retire to pray at the foot of the hills, amid the silence of a lonely wood. In its place arose the church of Santa Maria degli Angeli, which over the centuries has become surrounded by houses and buildings. But one of the most famous of the sites associated with the saint lies within a millennial forest of oak and ilex. It's the Eremo delle Carceri, where spirituality and nature inspired the Canticle of the Creatures. Francesco had renounced earthly pleasures to draw nearer to God through the contemplation of nature. His prayer celebrates all the creatures of the earth. The brothers are called sun, wind, and fire. The sisters, moon, stars, and water. The mother is the earth herself. The sheer beauty of the Umbrian landscapes seem to evoke the messages of peace that reach us from the distant past through the life and words of Francis of Assisi. His teachings are a universal symbol of the nature and spirituality that make the whole of Umbria such a very special place.